Design Girl writes, how do you choose pattern papers for the background of your pages? I used to be a solid cardstock person, and after watching more videos, I'm trying to use more pattern papers, but I'm struggling. I've mastered using a subtle grid or ledger, but how do you go beyond that? I notice my paper is either too busy or too dark. What should I look for to spot a good background paper? Glitter Girl, can you help Design Girl pick presentable patterns?
Of course I can. In fact, we're going to spend 2 weeks on this topic, and in these 2 adventures, I'm going to do things just a little bit differently. The idea is that I'm going to give you a formula to follow along with your own supplies, so you'll be able to scrap in real time if you want, or you can take a few notes and follow it at your own speed. And then the challenges for these 2 weeks will be to follow those formulas and see how they work for you. So today we're going to start with 2 4x6 photos. If you want to change the size, that's absolutely fine. But 2 4x6 photos that should be pretty informal and casual, just the sort of snapshots that have a little bit of a story that you want to tell, but nothing that's really, really themed. So I would steer clear of really formal things like wedding photos and really themed things like Christmas photos where there's the tree and everything like that, or a Halloween party, something that has a real specific theme to it. I would leave those for now, but just 2 everyday ordinary photos that you want to scrapbook. And then we're going to start with the boldest pattern paper and build this formula from there. The reason I wanted to pick some photos that are not really, really themed is that I'm not going to pay attention to the colors in the photo, so to speak. If I really wanted to pick photos just from these, or pick colors just from these photos, I suppose my options would be the peachy pink of the dress, the purple in the tie, gray in the suit, or green in the background. That's not really a great cohesive color scheme. We really failed at coordinating our outfits there, I guess. But instead, I'm going to choose colors based on the patterns only, and then it will end up working well with the photos with a few little tricks along the way. So the first thing to pick is going to be the boldest pattern paper that has the most color. I've chosen this one from Ellie's Studio, and actually both sides could work because they're both multicolored patterns. It's called Confetti, and I'm going to use this side. So my color scheme already has yellow, green, pink, and gray. Everything I'm going to pick from then on is going to come from these colors. So I'm going to go ahead and decide which colors I want to use more of and which ones I would only use as a little bit of an accent. I have one neutral here, so that's really nice and easy to know that my neutral throughout is going to be gray. From that, I automatically know if I'm going to edge the ink, edge things with ink, I'm going to be using black or gray ink, not brown. And if I want to add in a neutral to divide 2 colors that perhaps need something in between them, gray is going to be the color that is going to come in useful. So things like gray cardstock could really be a helping hand as I put all of this together. And then the 2 colors I want to work with from the bright colors here are the pink and the yellow. You might choose the yellow and the green and the pink, but I think it's handy to choose 2 of the brighter colors so that you can find other elements that you're going to add those colors throughout the page, and then a remaining color that will be just a little bit of a finishing accent. So for me, that's going to be the green. And I haven't really based that on the photos. I'm just looking at this one piece of pattern paper and making that decision from what's here. I would prefer to continue working with more pink and yellow, and then have gray be my neutral and green be an accent. Simple as that. I'm not going to overthink it. I'm just going to make that decision and then follow the formula from then on. So this bold pattern paper is actually going to be my background, which is a little bit different than what you might expect me to say for this question, because you might expect me to say to start with the more subtle pattern papers, but as we build it up, it will all come into play. So I want to then choose 1 pattern each of pink and yellow that I'm going to include in quite big pieces on the page. So having a look at other patterns, I've chosen this pink, which at its most saturated is a really good match for the saturation that's on this pattern paper that I've already chosen. But it does also go to a paler shade where you can see this is more light, a light salmon pink next to that hot pink. but I have the variety there, the shading, and it's not changing color, it's just changing shade from the saturated pink to the light pink. That's absolutely fine. That's not going to throw in too much that's going to be confusing. Now, this is a single colored pattern, so there's just pink and white. It might be that your pattern includes pink and cream, or pink and black, or pink and a neutral. And of course, you may not have chosen pink, but just follow the formula. You've selected this one of these colors, and you want a pattern that's going to go with it. In this pattern, you're looking for something that's smaller, single color, and repeating, so that you don't have to see the whole 12 by 12 of the pattern for it to make sense to your eye. If I were to cut this down to a 6 by 6 block, you would still understand what this pattern looks like, and you would know that the 12 by 12 looks as it does by seeing the 6 by 6. Yeah, there's not some big change in the pattern somewhere else. So that's my pink that's going to match here. And then I wanted to move on to the yellow. Well, this yellow is a little bit of a tougher match because there are quite a few shades of yellow out at the moment that are very pale. So it took me a few different collections until I found one that was a nice, rich, and kind of egg yolk yellow. And the chili bean soup yellows are a really good match. So I pulled out 3 different chili bean soup B-sides. Now these are from different collections. Some are older, some are current. So this kind of picnic plaid, for example, is the really current Happy Camper line. And then I have this that's more like a gingham from Fresh Vegetable Soup, and a wood grain, which is from Southern Chicken Dumpling Soup, all those different soup collections. But you can see that chili bean soup is really consistent in the colors that they're using here. When they use a yellow, it's always going to be this shade of yellow. So that's really helpful. Once you kind of get an idea of the different collections that are in your, the different patterns that are in your collection, you'll be able to know which come together better. Now, if this is a real challenge for you and looking for something from another collection and finding a good match to the color becomes really difficult, stop, don't fret, go back to the original collection that this pattern is from, because the chances are all of the yellows in that collection are going to be a good match to the yellow you've picked out. But I don't tend to buy full collections. I tend to buy bits and pieces, so I mix them up a little bit more often, and I just look for which colors from different companies work well with the others. And in this case, I'm going to go with the chili bean soup yellow. Again, this is the same color, but it also includes the lighter saturation. So I have the darker, richer yellow, but the wood grain lines are that paler yellow. That's another way to have a single colored print. It doesn't have to be with white or cream or black, but it is all one color. And I could use any of these 3. I'm going to pick the wood grain just because I like that one the most, but all 3 are small repeating patterns that you can understand if you were to cut it down to a smaller piece. So any of them would work. I'm just going to choose this one. And now I have the basis for my layout, which is going to be this bold pattern paper and these 2. But it would be really great to have a way to separate them. So I'm going to include one solid, and that's going to be in my neutral color of gray. So it's just simple as bringing in a sheet of gray cardstock, which I'll be able to use to edge things so that I can add a little bit of a dividing line between. Now that we've chosen all those patterns, the next step in the formula is to combine them. Start with your solid cardstock on your 12 by 12 multicolored background and cut this to a square that's going to give you a border around the edge. I'm not going to give you an exact measurement here because it's up to your eye how much of this pattern you want to show. With some patterns, it'll look great to have just a really narrow pattern around the edge. With some, you'll want quite a lot of the pattern to be seen around the edge of that neutral cardstock. So just start with the cardstock quite big, cut it down a little bit at a time and keep placing it on top, and that will be the easiest way to get to the spot where you're really happy with the balance. Keep in mind we're not going to leave a lot of this on show, it's just going to be a little bit of a border around the edge. So when you're happy with that, then you're going to use the measurements of this box to create 2 boxes of your other pattern papers that are going to go inside. So now I can add my two single colored pattern papers on top of the gray box that gives me a frame that divides those pattern papers from my nice bold pattern in the background with all the colors. Because you've cut this pattern paper to smaller than half of the sheet, you should now have enough of that pattern paper that it could be a photo mat. And my first suggestion for looking at a pattern that would go around the photo is to look at the reverse of these two patterns to see if by chance either of them will go well with the colors that you've chosen. It turned out that the back of this, even though it's from a different collection, this is from Cartabella Hello Again, and this is the Ellie Studio, but the multicolored side of this is a pretty good match for the different patterns, or the different colors that are represented in that original pattern. So I'm just going to cut this down to a mat. The pattern itself, it's fountain pens with feathers at the end, and that pattern itself isn't particularly relevant to the page, but because I'm cutting it down to just the small piece around the edge, you're not really going to see much of the pen detailing. It's going to look a little bit more like some arrows and just represent all those colors, so that should be okay. Now, of course, when you turn over those two pattern papers, the other side is not always going to be a good match to the collections that you've chosen. That's absolutely okay. You just want to go through and find another pattern that's going to work. Because you're only using a little bit of it, you might choose that one of the additional colors that you haven't chosen from your pattern yet. Or you might just choose another shade or another pattern in the same two colors that you've chosen already. Or one more option, if you want to be a little bit if you want to use a little bit more of this background paper, then before you add the gray or the neutral cardstock box, cut out the center, and you can save that to use it for a mat. But the reason why I haven't done that on this particular page is because I want to place my photos slightly over the edge, which would mean that that pattern and this pattern would be the same print. So in cases like that, I tend to save that mat for the facing page in my album, if that's any help, but we're getting a little bit off track there, so I'll just leave that one for now. But you just want to go through and find another pattern. It might be something that's not a full sheet. You can look through your scraps and see if there's anything else you can pick up. It can be a multicolor or a single color pattern. It can even be solid cardstock, because you're only going to use that little bit around the edge, so it's not quite as difficult to choose. You have a little bit more freedom, and it will be lenient and work well. So now, deciding where your photo should go, look at the lines that occur in your photo. So in this particular case, the direction of the photo, the way that people are looking, and the empty space in the photo, it works better to frame it this way so that I can build here rather than this way, which looks a little bit like everybody's looking off the edge of the page. So I'm going to place it over here, and then I'm going to build my title, my journaling, and my embellishment on this side of the page. Now we're back to another stage of picking and choosing, because we have papers and photos all in place, but we haven't chosen the other elements of the page. Now, I'm going to start with letter stickers and then go into the embellishments. Now, I'm using stickers for pretty much everything here, but you really don't have to be tied into just stickers. That just happens to be what I use most often. But you can substitute the same rules for color, they're not rules, but the same guidelines for color and pattern and all those things to other elements like die cuts and flare and anything like lettering that you might cut yourself rather than using a pre-made product. Don't feel like you have to use stickers and letter stickers and all things like that. So what I do with the lettering is that I almost always use two styles of lettering, normally one small and one large, and you've seen that on plenty of my pages. But here's what I'm doing. I'm almost always choosing one color and one neutral from my color scheme. So I have the gray, and I'm using the Kenzie thickers in gray. And then some smaller letter stickers. These are the Mini Market in Snow Cone Pink. So again, it's a case of really trying not to overthink it. Find one large alphabet and one small alphabet, one neutral, one color, and it could be the other way around. These could be gray and these could be pink. That works absolutely fine. Can also use the yellow instead of the pink. Either color that you chose here is fine for the lettering. So I've chosen those two. Once I found them, I stop and I move on to the next step. So try not to go through every single set of letter stickers that you have and look at every single option. Look until you find one neutral and one color that look nice together, and then stop there. Then with the embellishments, I've pulled out a few different things here. One cut apart sheet and then some sticker sheets. And I've got both a little bit that come from collections that are already here. So this is a jelly bean soup, so I know the yellow is going to be a good match. And this is that Hello Again collection that I've used here and here, so I know that some of the colors there will work well. But I also pulled out some other elements that just had the right colors. So this collection here and now from Echo Park has a lot of hot pink. And this collection, the Find Your Wings and Fly by My Mind's Eye, has that nice warm yellow. But if I look at all of these, they also have colors that are not included in that color scheme. So what I want to do is choose only the elements that have the colors I've chosen. Now, with further work, you can include more and more colors as you go. But if this is a question that comes to you as you scrap, then I would suggest starting with just the colors in that original pattern paper. So if I look at this cut apart sheet next to that pattern paper, this turquoise that's all over here does not show up in this pattern paper. So I'm automatically going to eliminate anything on this sheet that has the turquoise and try to stick with the things that just have the yellow, the green, and the gray. So that gives me this box and this one. Everything else includes turquoise. I could probably get away with this one with the turquoise just as the lines, because that's almost a neutral. We see blue on notebook paper all the time and we don't really register it as a color. But technically there is turquoise there. So if I am looking at this sheet, I'm just going to look at those 3 boxes, and that will keep me tied into this original color scheme. So I'm going to be looking at that same rule as I look at each of these elements. And what I tend to do at this point is to cut the stickers away from the sheet so that I can move them around and be happy with the design. So this does mean that I'm going to cut up my sheet, which may not be the way you like to work, because then I end up with partial sticker sheets back in my stash. That's just a personal preference thing, and if that bothers your creative process, do not cut them apart. And it does mean that sometimes I'm going to cut out pieces and then not use them on this layout. I have a little bowl that you can't see off the camera that holds the bits and pieces that I've started to put on a page and then not, and I just keep them there and use them on the next few pages. The next time that color scheme comes up, they're right there and I can grab them, and that really works for me, and I just try not to make it more complicated than that. Now that I have quite a few cut out, I can start moving them around the page and seeing where things might work. So these 2 journaling cards were side by side, and I realized that maybe I shouldn't cut them apart. As I was starting to cut the sheet apart, I realized that they actually kind of worked well as one block of pattern paper. And aligning the text here with the edge then means that this box is going to go off the edge of the page and I'll just trim it into place. But that would give me a good place to contain my journaling. So I think I will go ahead and leave that as one unit, and then I'm going to build on top of that. So I know I want to have room here to write, but I also am not particularly keen on the random butterfly here. I'd like to bring some white into this grouping because this pattern paper is cream based, where the other patterns I've used so far are more of a white, especially this one. So by choosing something that had white as well as the yellow and the green, I can add that over the top here and bring the white into this grouping so that there's not this big difference between, oh, this part of the page is white and this part of the page is cream. If you're going to use the 2 together, it works a bit better if you can blend them by using the 2 different elements together. So I'll just place this here for the moment to think that that's going to cover up that little butterfly still gives me room for writing there. And the other thing was that I love this little lyric, but I much prefer when the pattern papers spell it with an E, because we don't spell gray with an A in this country where I live. So it just looks odd to my eye. Of course, there's nothing actually wrong with it, but I just like to include the spelling that I use in my albums wherever possible. So I'm thinking that this lyric is known well enough that I don't even really need to include the whole thing. And maybe I should just cover up the bottom two lines and use one of these other elements there. So this one is also a line that puts a song in your head. So I thought maybe I could use these together. And so I'd have the flowers running into this arrow and like a big word block that kind of makes you sing different songs. That's sort of the idea. Now I have all these different pieces, so I'm just going through each piece looking for a good spot on the page. Now this is going to be a little different on every layout. I have used quite a bit of room for this embellishment, and I still have my title to add, but I think I can put the title in this spot here. So I'll go ahead and get all of this embellishment in place before I add the title, so that I know I'm not going to end up with a gap in the middle. If I was going to have the title right here, I'd go ahead and add the title next. It's whatever is going to fit in this gap of space here. Now, it may be that when you put this page together, you didn't have two blocks like this, because that's kind of an oddity that I had two blocks next to each other that worked really well. You could have two separate blocks and put them together. This could be one 4x6 card. This could just be a 4x6 block of pattern paper. There are all sorts of different things you could put in this spot, but you're looking for something that will be a block that will include your journaling, and something that will give you something that bridges the gap between the edge of the page and the edge of the photo. So whatever you find for this space, then you're going to embellish below it, and the title and embellishment above, and they can go in either order. If it looks better with your title here and some more embellishment at the top, that's fine. If it works better with embellishment here and the title at the top, that's fine too. Okay, just a few little steps now before the page is finished. At this point, have a look at everything that's in place and look at the patterns that appear just once and do a little bit of an evaluation. So for example, this pattern, the shape of this pattern appears just once, but it actually appears twice to your eye because it's above this block of paper and it's below this block of paper, even though we know that's one large block. So that paper appears in more than one spot on the page. Same thing with this one. This pattern appears up here and then down at the bottom of the block as well. But there are plenty of patterns that only appear once on the page. Sometimes that's absolutely fine and that's what you want. Other times it's a good thing to spot and repeat somewhere else. The thing that catches my eye in this particular case is that I have a floral here and I have nothing else floral on the entire page. So because it's a completely different style of pattern, I'd like to bring in a little bit more of something like that to match on the other side of the page. And the reason that I like using those sticker sheets is because normally there will be more than one piece of the whole sticker sheet that's going to include that pattern. So I don't have that same exact floral again, but I do have other florals. I of course have this giant one, and then if I look to the smaller pieces, I've got one here with yellow flowers and two smaller ones here with pink flowers. I think this one would be the best bet because I could use this little piece as the top layer in a little gathering. So if I then look to my layout, if I have the floral here and I'd like to bring in floral somewhere else, where else would I put it? Well, the other spot where I have that green is over here on the diagonal, and this is a space that's quite empty and unembellished at the moment, so that would make a good spot for that little flower. Now, I could go ahead and cut that apart. Since I knew I wanted to use pop dots with this particular sticker, I'm not going to worry about cutting it out. I'm just going to go ahead and put the pop dots on the back so that I can still move it around without sticking it to anything. And I want something else that's going to come together in this grouping, so then I start to look at what else could I repeat. So now I'm getting a good spot here where I could just fit in the little stem in between two words, and it's going to connect all those pieces. It would be nice to have something here in this gap. So if I can find a little sticker, I could repeat the idea of a little arrow, and in fact I like this one better than the one with the important. I like the remember better. So what if I add this one up here? And since I already have pink that's flat, I think I'll add pop dots to this piece as well. And then it would be nice to have just one teeny tiny bit of yellow to bring that together with all the other embellishment that's at the other sides. Enamel dots work really well to add just a little bit of color, and if there's not something that where you can space the dots around, you can just add a little line of 3. But then of course that made me want to repeat that idea, so I repeated the flowers from here to here. It would be nice if I could then repeat the enamel dots back at the bottom of the page. So I looked for a place down here. I didn't have 3 more of the same size, so I couldn't do that same 3 in a line technique, but I could add 1 to the flower, and just a little bit of something small like that is enough to bring the 2 together. So that's how I try to keep it from becoming too much of a back and forth, because I could look at this and think, but now I have a lot of pink up here, maybe I should bring pink down here. And I could add in another arrow sticker here, but if I look, I do actually have pink. I've got the pink of this arrow, so I don't really need to bring in more and more. I can just find a place and stop. So the patterns, pretty much all of the patterns appear more than once, or they appear once in a really bold way, like the multicolored bit here around the edge, and that is something that does sort of repeat in the shapes of all these little arrows. So that's what I'm looking for, is a balance of multicolored pattern with single colored pattern that complements it, and then trying to repeat something back to that multicolored somewhere else, making sure that little patterns appear in more than one place on the page so they don't feel too disconnected. And I hope that you'll give the little formula a try, and then in next week's adventure we're going to pick up on how that's just one way to look at all these different ways to mix patterns, and we're going to go about it a different way. So if you do have time between now and next week's adventure to give this a try, you'll be right in the mindset to know how all of those notes come together. Now, I'm going to stop this layout here, but this is the point where I would suggest you refer back to the style of your albums. If you would ordinarily then take in a stamp and go around and add little stamp details, or if you would add little drops of ink, anything like that that's your personal touch that you would repeat page after page, you would add to this. And it might be that I've already gone a little bit too far from the amount of embellishment that you would include, and if that's the case, then you could have already stopped. That's fine. Keep it true to whatever you would use in your albums, but do give this a try. Start with that pattern paper. Don't worry too much about the pattern paper colors to the photos, because if you're using some just nice ordinary everyday happy photos, you'll probably get it to be able to match. So we'll look at more specifics like formal events and Christmas and things like that over the rest of the year, and we'll talk specifically about some more techniques next week. But I hope you'll give this a try. 1 multicolored pattern, these 2 boxes of single colored patterns that came from that, divided by this neutral. If you need to go through the steps again, you can just rewind and pause and as many times as you need to. So that's your challenge for this week, to follow those steps, and then next week we will start again and see where we can give you a little bit more confidence yet with pattern paper. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.
Join us next week for the continuing adventures of Glitter Girl and the ongoing mystery of the scrapbooker behind the mask at twopeasinabucket.com.